They can always come up with reinforcement. No one wants war anywhere. Not unless they're insane. People who are insane want wars. You know it makes sense, man. Rally around the Coca-Cola. Take the Coca-Cola. Protect the Coca-Cola, man. You got to protect the Coca-Cola. Worldwide, no. You got to protect the Coca-Cola.
Since the Second World War, the Americans have pursued a double-edged strategy. On the one hand, they have attempted to make the world safe for capitalism. This was, in a sense, the strategy of the Cold War, to maintain the world for Western-type market capitalism. But at the second, the second strand of that strategy in the Cold War period was to ensure that Washington's preeminence and dominance within that context, within that paradigm. So long as the Cold War continued, so long as there was this serious military threat from the Russians up until the end of the beginning of the 1990s, so long as the Cold War continued, there's a genuine convergence of those two interests. Nobody beyond the Americans are capable of taking on the Russians militarily, so the Western nations, Europe, Japan, the big capitalist countries and whatnot, find it in their interest to become subordinate to the Americans, really, over that 40 to 50 year period. What has happened over the last 10, 12 years since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Eastern Bloc countries, is essentially, on the one hand there is the victory of the Western style model, the victory of the West in the Cold War, but the other side of the context though, is the fact that there is no longer a visible threat, and for all the talk of Iraq being a threat, nobody in the State Department and nobody within the higher echelons of the EU and whatever seriously consider the Iraqis to have been a threat to anybody. They had trouble fighting the Iranians in a war for 10 years. The idea that they are a threat to the West is just nonsense, basically. Right? Nobody considers them to be a threat as such. So there is no threat, and that allows for a divergence of these two strands of American strategy over the last 10, 12 years. Basically, the strand of maintaining the system for the free market, which the British, the Germans, the Japanese, whoever, all agree with, and the strand of maintaining Washington's dominance within that paradigm begin to diverge. And what we've got over the last 10 years is a series of policy documents from the Americans whereby they have said we have got to be very clear, very straightforward in our attempt to reimpose our authority on the world. To give you a threat, this is from Rebuilding American Defences. This is from the Project for the New American Century. I don't know if you've heard of these people. These are the neoconservatives from the middle of the 1990s. We've been talking about the need to attack Iraq, the need to smash Saddam, to finish the job that George Bush Sr. Started 12 years ago, to go in, and these are the people who basically surround George W. at the moment, people like Rumsfeld and Cheney and whatever else. Now let's look at what they talk about here. At present, the United States faces no global rival. America's grand strategy should aim to preserve and extend this advantaged position as far into the future as possible. There are, however, potentially powerful states dissatisfied with the current situation and eager to change it. The American peace reaches across the globe. The forces that preserve the peace is increasingly overwhelmed by its tasks, i.e. the American military, is increasingly overwhelmed by its task of maintaining the American peace and maintaining American hegemony. America's global leadership and its role as the guarantor of the current great power peace relies upon the safety of the American homeland, the preservation of a favourable balance of power in Europe, the Middle East and the surrounding energy producing regions. Come on, we've got to be honest about this, is the war for oil. And they're really honest about it. You know, the fact that we don't have these things reproduced day in, day out inside the British press is a disgrace, really. The surrounding energy producing regions and East Asia, the general stability of the international system of nation states relative to terrorism, organised crime and other non-state actors. They're very clear. There needs to be, they say, a massive expansion in American military spending in order to impose American power, and crucially, you know, this is a global strategy of imposing American power across the world, but at the same time, crucially in the Middle East is the issue of oil. I mean, I've got in front of me, I won't bore you with the couple of hundred pages of it, the National Energy Policy, which was developed by, we're not talking about a bunch of nobodies who are developing the National Energy Policy. Dick Cheney's on the panel here, Colin Powell, Paul O'Neill, Secretary for the Treasury, Gail Norton, Secretary of the Interior, blah, blah, blah. Big names. National Energy Strategy of the American, that was published in 2001. What does that say? It's very straightforward. We increasingly need more oil.